Good morning and welcome to Talks at Google in Cambridge, Mass. Today it's my great pleasure to introduce one of the most interesting people I know, Bill Powers. Bill has worked for 2 decades in development aid and conservation in Latin America, Africa, and North America. From 2002 to 2004, he managed the community components of a project in the Bolivian Amazon that won a 2003 prize for environmental innovation from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. He's worked at the World Bank and holds international relations degrees from Brown and Georgetown. He's a senior fellow at the World Policy Institute and an adjunct faculty member at New York University. New Slow City is his 4th book for adults. They're all excellent, and you can read more about them at his website, www.williampowersbooks.com. So, burned out after years of doing everything I just listed, Bill spent a season in a 12-foot by 12-foot cabin off the grid in North Carolina. He then attempted to do something similar in New York City. I suspect we're about to get an entirely new perspective on work-life balance, as well as the benefit of Bill's extensive experience in international affairs. Please join me in welcoming Bill Powers.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thanks very much for coming on a Monday morning to this gathering. It's just a great pleasure to be here at Google. I use your products, and I think they're wonderful. And because you're such an intelligent audience, I'm going to try to pack a lot in to this hour we have together. And I'm going to really give some perspectives on what is the philosophical underpinning for these new slow movements and movements towards minimalism and simplicity and work-life balance, and why it's happening now with the environmental crisis and the triple threat that's happening. And I'm also going to share some personal experiences from my own life, this journey that Jonathan was talking about, from New York City all around the world to a tiny 12 by 12 cabin in North Carolina and so on, as a way of provoking questions and maybe inspiring you to think about some new things that you can do in your work and your life, and you take from it what you will. So with that said, we're in this moment of what you might call the great turning, where there are related movements around slow issues, like fast food is being replaced by slow food. You know about the slow food movement. There's 6,000 conviviums around the country. People get together and prepare local foods and eat them with friends. Also, of course, having a more vegetarian diet or eating lower on the food chain, of course, has less greenhouse gas emissions, another advantage. There's also slow money, which looks at how we're investing our capital. Is it being invested in big agro-business, for example, that contributes a lot of chemicals and monocultures, or is it going towards sustainable agriculture? The issue of work-life balance is actually tied into the culture of fast and more and the response to it. So I know here at Google there's been a lot of efforts to have flex time and other things that you're experimenting with. You probably know that Carlos Slim, the world's richest man, called for a 3-day work week recently and has repeated it many times. And he says it will happen. He says most recently that he's realized through his career that really life is about more than just working. And actually you can get a ton of efficiency into these 3 11-hour days and then have 4 days to refresh yourself, have creative pursuits, and come back to work much more changed. So I don't know if you know, does this have a little pointer on it? Let's see, does this? Yeah, it does. So the United States actually is the lowest amount of leave in the industrialized world. We only have 12 days. And there's this whole Take Back Your Time movement. I don't know, who's heard of Take Back Your Time Day, October 24th each year? It's the day when Europeans could stop working, and Americans have to work to the end of the year because they get 9 weeks more vacation than we do on average a year. That's how much more. And these are other industrialized countries. So it's a way of saying, even medieval peasants worked less than we did in terms of the number of hours. If you look at how productivity from 1970 to 2010 has actually gone 4-fold including using the kind of tools that you're making. And yet our hours have gone up. Why is it that the average hour of work is 4 times more productive, and yet we're working more hours, and much more than our industrialized counterparts? Another sort of model that's out there that you may have heard of, who's heard of transition towns? Very few of you. Well, basically, the idea is that we're in this era of kind of fossil fuels, and we need to get to more solar, winds. We're also in an era of mass organization, and why not look more at small? So small is beautiful, getting back to models of organization at the neighborhood level, the community level. So in New York City, for example, there's transition neighborhoods in New York where you're looking at how we source our energy for that neighborhood, where we get our food, how can you source it more effectively? So all over the world, and more so in England than anywhere, there are these transition communities really figuring out how to be self-sustainable in a world where fossil fuels become less and less viable in terms of climate change. And this is an example of sort of transition town type of communities and architecture, designing with nature, biomimicry, mimicking the way nature creates and creating our architecture that way. Even in cities, how we can look at human well-being as the basis for how we're organizing things and create around that. I mean, even walking around here in Kendall Square, it's beautiful, MIT is very nice, all of this, but what if we had it even nicer? What if there were more buildings that were kind of shaped around nature? There's a whole environmental psychology or eco-psychology area that's out now that they're looking at the fact that humans' relationship with nature is part of our emotional and social well-being. And when we cut that cord, we're bound to feel depressed. And a lot of the kind of neuroses and bipolar disorders and everything is actually tied to this disconnection with nature. E.O. Wilson talks about this in his biomimicry theory. So these types of transition and green architecture activities actually help that as well. So there's all these things that are this great turning. Unfortunately, there is this culture of fast and more. And let me just clarify that when I say slow, I'm not talking about always going slow. I'm talking about being self-paced, being able to determine the rhythm of your own life, having the control of that, and to being able to vary the rhythm, the tempo gusto, the right speed, as they say in music. So we're in this system where, unfortunately, the industrial model of growth is leading to this type of water shortage. Last week in Sao Paulo, they had massive water shortages, which caused riots. This is caused by climate change and deforestation. As you know, in China, for example, the pollution from coastal China spreads across the rest of Asia. Their environmental problems are not at respecting boundaries. And we have in Bolivia, where I'm currently living, we left New York for Bolivia last year, and that's another story which I'll tell you about. But this is the example of deep poverty interacting with cycles of slash and burn agriculture, cutting down the rainforests. And at the same time, huge monocropping. So I talked about slow money and investing in sustainable agriculture. When you just have your investment in this is Archidania Midlands, ADM in Bolivia, cutting down huge amounts of rainforest for our grains and so on. So we really need to look at sort of what we're doing here and how it's felt around the world. For example, this is the border of Bolivia and Brazil where we are right now. This is Bolivia, 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 Bolivia. And as you can see, the Brazilian side is totally kind of cut down for soy, for chia, the new crop that everyone's growing, for cattle ranching and so on. And Bolivia is still that more uninhabited boundary, but the same process is coming there. Luckily, however, there is no global warming. I guess do you see this? They just confused Fahrenheit and Celsius. There's no problem with global warming. Not really. Of course, there is. And I don't have to talk to you about this. I'm sure everyone here knows about the problem. And just walk outside today, or look at last winter, how extreme it was. All of these changes that we're seeing, even here in New England, very, very clearly, even felt more strongly in places like Greenland or Bolivia. This is Bolivia, Chacaltaya Mountain. This was Bolivia's only ski resort. In just a matter of decades, it's gone from being a glacier to nothing. So they had to close the ski resort recently. It doesn't exist anymore because, like all the other glaciers in Bolivia, they're melting, and it's affecting the water supply for millions of people. So these are the types of issues that have led even countries like the Maldives to have their cabinet meetings underwater. This is the president of the Maldives, and they're actually signing legislation underwater to show that their country is about to go under. And in my own city, New York, of course, Hurricane Sandy and the effects that it had, our building was out of power for 2 weeks, and everything was flooded. There was environmental refugees in New York. My students at NYU were in the Bronx, like in shanties. It was just terrible for 2 weeks, so we were feeling it there. And of course, a lot of this is tied in with sort of subsidies for oil and gas and hardly anything for renewables. We don't have to go into that in detail. So all this anecdotal stuff and all these different examples is tied into a very stark fact. And that's this, that our average footprint of the average American is 5 planets. This is UN scientists who say that it would take 5 planets of resources if everyone lived at our level of consumption. I mean, that is an extreme point of view. And the reason is because of what we call overdevelopment. There's development, and then there's underdevelopment, which is like maybe 20% of humanity is underdeveloped, starving, in war zones, without enough. 60% of humanity is developed, that's subsistence, agriculture, living with enough. And then there's overdevelopment. Overdevelopment is sort of taking it too far. And the kind of mega diversity that you see in a place like Bolivia, unfortunately, is turning into this. I just recently found these photos. This is the new mall in Santa Cruz, the first mall in Bolivia that's come. And it's just amazing to see the chains like McDonald's and Hard Rock and everything coming into the city and this enormous mall. It's really, to me, quite shocking because this is the Bolivia that I know. And this is where we're going with it. So I'm talking about a big philosophical issue that actually led me to be kind of depressed after 10 years of working. We had prize-winning projects from the JFK school in rainforests in Bolivia with carbon sequestration. We had all kinds of incredible things we were doing that were successful. But with 5 planets of resources, sometimes it felt like it was in vain. So after 10 years of working abroad, to tell you a personal story, I came back to the US in 2007. And I ended up living in this cabin. It was a 12-foot by 12-foot cabin off-grid in North Carolina. It's a permaculture farm. And can you picture what 12-foot by 12-foot is? Like how big that is?
Less than what you're standing on.
Right. So maybe, why don't we just do a little thing just so we can understand it? Can you 4 stand up here and can try to arrange yourself 12 by 12? See if you can do that. So is that right? Too big, right. I'm probably going off camera, but let me just come down for a second here. So like this is basically, maybe you would have to be here, but basically this was the 12 by 12 what it was like. So this is where I lived. Yeah, that's perfect, thank you. Okay, so just to give you a visual here, I would come into the house like this, and there was 1 bed up in a loft, a little place to cook with natural gas here, and a rocking chair over here in the corner, and the entrance and candles. And that was it. And this belongs to a physician in North Carolina who actually downsized from a big house and moved into this thing. And she's been living in it for 10 years. And she invited me to live there for a season. So you can imagine being in the middle of America and living in this tiny 12 by 12 kind of blew me away. I was there actually spring. It was like end of winter into spring. So even when it's cold, there's no wood burning stove. You use more layers. Homo sapiens were a strong species. We adapt to lots of environments. And that's what I also realized working around the world and living in this 12 by 12, especially, was that you can adapt to it. So this just gives you a little, thank you for showing the No heat at all. It is North Carolina, of course, so it has to be adapted to whatever environment you're in. And just to give you some more images, like this is the model that this physician, Dr. Jackie Benton, is modeling. So like there's the 12 by 12, which only cost $7,000 to build. $10,000 for her land, 2 acres full of permaculture paradise of 200 species of crops and so on, a little no-name creek over here. It's this type of a design with rainwater catchment, everything off grid, and she lives there. So that actually, and these are the types of neighbors, you get all this organic produce. It was sort of like what I was used to experiencing in places like Bolivia, but in the middle of the US. They're designing around open space and intensive agriculture, agroforestry, smaller scale. Just to sort of show you what this is in terms of the data, living 12 by 12 or living more simply, right? It does actually bring joy because actually happiness or well-being increases very quickly if you're poor, if you're very poor, to like $9,000 in GDP, but then it kind of plateaus. So this is the basic idea, that happiness, of course it goes up with money, but then it plateaus, is the idea. So when I came back to New York City after living in the 12 by 12, I found that our townhouse that we own in Queens, my wife and I, was just too big. It was 2,000 square feet. And so we moved to this tiny apartment. These are just examples. This is not our apartment, but of a micro apartment in Manhattan, 340 square feet. So it was like two 12 by 12s put together. And we experimented for a year living very minimalist in the belly of the beast, New York City. And it was actually quite fascinating because we started to see our micro apartment, and by the way, this is part of Bloomberg's initiative for everyone to live in smaller apartments, lower rents and so on. I mean, we thought of it as a ship. We designed it as a ship. Everything had its place. There was no more clutter. We just felt in some ways happier because we knew where everything was and we had less stuff to worry about. So there's some advantages to minimalizing and lower rents. I also reduced my working hours by a lot, basically to the 3-hour work week that Carlos Slim is calling for, three-day work week. And I just think that these technologies that you all are involved in are beautiful things. I mean, if they're your tool and you're not their fool, if you're actually using them for liberating yourself from the work and spend treadmill, for giving yourself more free time to enjoy your family, friends, nature, your hobbies, what you love to do. Think of things that you love to do and imagine doing them 5 times more than you are right now. I hope this is not too subversive a thought for being in the office on a Monday morning. But the idea is that I was working, honestly, a 2-day work week for the good part of that year that we lived slow, and just enjoying so much more about the city and just working smarter instead of harder. And it was this whole other philosophy. Really, just to switch, what it comes down to in some ways is a Greek word that Aristotle used to talk about a lot, which was eudaimonia. It's what is the best life? That's what the Greeks would struggle with, and that's what we don't struggle with enough these days, is what is the economy for? What is work for, How do we create this best life? And I'm not going to give you my entire graduate course in economic development right now, but just to let you know that there are various perspectives on what development is, okay? What we think is development is growth economics. That's the dominant paradigm. And then there's a hybrid of that, which is the human development paradigm, like the HDI index, which says, we should bring people into development. It's not just about growing economies. We have to think about people. But there are these wonderful kind of critiques, innovators in theory and practice and development who are saying biocentrism, post-development. I recommend Arturo Escobar. He has a book called Encountering Development, which is genius, Encountering Developments. David Abrams' work on The Spell of the Sensuous, more biocentric points of views. Escobar, for example, this anthropologist, says we need to look at the West, our own culture, as exotic. Very difficult to do, but this is exotic, this kind of deforestation, this is exotic. So there's the country of Nasarima. Do you know where that is, Nasarima? Have you heard this? Exactly. It's American spelled backwards. So you just kind of reverse the way you look at our own culture for a second. It looks very different. This we talked about, biocentrism and expanding emotional connection to nature. Very key ideas of, even when you think about your work at Google or how you organize your time and so on, I mean, is it possible for a second to look at things from the perspective of other species, not just an anthropocentric point of view of how this benefits our species, but how it benefits the whole? And you immediately have this shift in your consciousness where you just feel more aligned with the world, you feel happier, you feel like what you're doing is more inclusive. I'm not saying you have to become a vegan, and I'm not a vegetarian myself, but I'm just saying that there's this way of seeing the world that's very different from how we see it. And these more critical development theorists are pointing that way. You are now entering a stress-free zone. So the point of this is that I just want to share, most recently, my wife and I took another kind of experimental step, because we're always kind of life hacking, figuring out how to do things differently and experimenting, because you only live once and you might as well push your boundaries. So we actually moved from New York after we were there for 5 years. We moved down to Bolivia. So now I'm coming to you here from a town of 4,000 people, where the Andes meets the Amazon in central Bolivia. It's a beautiful town called Samaipata. It's where the Andes elbows into the Amazon. So you see it's like forested. This is Samaipata. But also there's mountainous kind of climate. And there's people from 30 countries here. And a lot of people are innovating around different aspects of what I'm talking about. Slow money, slow living, permaculture, which is combining architecture with landscape design in harmony with nature. All these ideas. And it's a very beautiful place to be. Also, right now in Bolivia, do you know that they have the law of Mother Earth as their macro law? It sounds kind of crazy. But the idea is that the Earth has sort of 9 indelible rights, and you can sue corporations for violating the rights of Pachamama, as they call it. So for them, the most important thing is Pachamama, because all life comes from that. And so the right to life and to exist, vital functions of the ecosystem, all of that is legislated. Now, they're not perfect in implementing it, but they do have this new framework that they're seeing. So a lot of what we're doing at the local level in Transition Town relates to the national policy. And Bolivia is kind of basing some of their stuff around the fact that, and this is another way of looking at what I showed you before, but as personal income increases, sort of the percentage of people identifying themselves as very happy stays the same. This is in the United States over the years. So they're saying, OK, well, if that's the case, then how do you have a living well policy? And that's, by the way, what Bolivia has as their other sort of norm, is living well. Have you heard of this? Living well, vivir bien in Spanish. What's our philosophy in the US? Is it vivir bien? Is it living well? Or what would you say it is? What's the dominant ethos?
Work hard, play hard.
Work hard, play hard? That's probably Google's ethos. But what about like just sort of the American? Maybe work hard, play hard. But what would you say? More. Yeah, more. Better, right? Living better. In Bolivia, it's Quechua, Aymara, Guarani, Chiquitano. It's an indigenous country. It's 75% indigenous. Their philosophy is living well. So you get to a certain point of development, like whatever, like the other graph, where you get to a certain point, and then you have a steady state economy. That's what Herman Daly has been telling us for years, this famous economist, that just like the human body grows to a certain level and then stops growing and maintains equilibrium and health, so too should our economy grow to a certain level and then not have to have this hyper-development path. So Bolivia is playing with that creative edge of how to do an economy at a national level according to living well and not better. It's an interesting thing that we're kind of about. Just to show you, this is our house that we just finished. Small house. So we use some of the minimalism design. This whole house we built out of adobe from our own land. This is where the adobe was dug up. It's thermal mass 40 centimeters. It maintains 22 degrees Celsius all year round with no heating or cooling because of the adobe. There was no embedded carbon because it was just baked by the sun right there on our property. And it's beautiful. We have beautiful windows and double doors and stuff like that, but it's minimalist, beautiful, and ecological. Like all of our waste is reused. It goes to banana trees. The sewage goes into a tank that gets filtered through different plants, and everything in the gray water is going to a composting area. So this is what we're kind of experimenting with there. Another example of ecological architecture. And I like this cartoon. So what if we created a better world for nothing? That's almost like the best you can say, is that I think we need to just keep pushing our boundaries. Just to sum up what I've been talking about, getting more creative, keeping in mind the Earth's biophysical limits in our decisions, having a more ecocentric point of view, trying to find more happiness and joy and work-life balance. All of this is tied together. All of it's tied to the big challenge of our time, which is confronting this culture of fast and more that's contributing to ecocide, or the destruction of life's vital processes, and finding a new system. A system that's based more in principles of a steady state economy, of transition towns, of a slower, saner, fit for the future type of a life. And I think every single one of us has a role. Like in this room, whatever you're doing here or in your civic organizations in your free time or whatever, you have a role in this change. And I would just encourage you to think about what that role could be. And I hope that you read my book, New Slow City, which Jonathan was nice enough to get for all of you. And that the book is not really sort of lecturing as to like what you should do, but I think it's opening up a lot of questions about ways that we can push ourselves to like think about these things more deeply, enjoy life more fully, be less tethered to other people's agendas and to big systems of control. And I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. So thank you. Yes?
Slide, what are we looking at on the bottom right?
Well, this is what's called skyscraper agriculture. So in just one sort of recycled tower like that, you can produce food for like 50 square blocks. This is Brooklyn Grange. It's an idea. It's a model. This is Brooklyn Grange in Long Island City, New York, where I take my students for NYU. It was started by NYU students. It's the world's largest rooftop organic farm. So on the old Standard Oil building, they produce well over an acre of intensively cropped organic agriculture that just goes on the subway and goes to the restaurants in New York City. It's a brilliant idea. It's employing all these people. They're outside working. They're on the roof of a building. They have all these new ultralight soils that can go on the roof. So this is what exists now, and this is sort of like one of the ideas for the future. Yeah?
What do you think of vertical agriculture and how far has it come? How close is vertical agriculture to being achieved?
It's expanding rapidly. Like in New York, this Brooklyn Grange expanded 150% last year to the Brooklyn Navy Yard rooftops that they've now taken over. On a commercial level, there's greenhouse rooftop agriculture coming in. This is soil farms. That's even more productive. And these new soils that they have, and it's easy to use like a variety of roofs. If they just use 10% of New York's roofs, they could feed the entire city. But there's also, let's not forget, 600 green thumb community gardens that are provided sometimes by the city, where people are doing urban agriculture in lots and producing lots of food on the ground, too. So that's another important part of the picture. Yeah, OK, so.
I just had a question. How do you make money while you're living in Bolivia or Australia?
How do I make money? Well, all right. So do you know Juliet Schor, the economist at Boston College? She wrote a lot about this. She has a book called True Wealth, where she talks about self-provisioning. Okay? So in the new economy, those of us sitting in this room are lucky enough to have these types of skills that can be done anywhere. Like that photo I have of the woman with her laptop, her feet in the water. I mean, that's what I love about these wonderful tools is you can be anywhere. So for me personally, like I have multiple income streams, from different things, from speaking engagements, from writing, from teaching, from
Travel to the place right? And you had to have power to power your device.
Right, that's true. Well, I mean, so power, we're set up for solar, but as of now, we're using the town power, which is natural gas. And yeah, so we're not saying that you have to be a radical, off-the-grid, self-sufficient lifestyle. I mean, that's possible, but I talk about it as part of being self-sufficient-ish, right? Kind of self-sufficient. So we're able to produce a lot of our food just right there in front of that little house that you saw. We produce a lot of our food year-round. And we have 30 kinds of fruit trees growing and everything else. We're developing a little cottage industry kind of on the lands as one income stream. There's the writing. My wife does a little bit of consulting at the UN, like 3 months a year. So you piece that all together, it adds up to plenty. And if you've minimalized your expenses too, and that's another thing. I recommend Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez's book, Your Money or Your Life, which shows you how to really look at what expenses in your life don't give you the proper joy to stuff ratio. Like how much joy are you getting out of a particular purchase, that type of an idea. So we did that. We analyzed it very carefully, and we reduced our expenses by a lot. And we also look at okay, how do you increase your hourly income? In a certain amount of time. It's like even some of the Tim Ferriss stuff, about sort of 80-20 principle, that you get 20% of your results from 80% of your activity. So why not do more in the 20% that gives you 80% of the results, right? So working smarter in that way. So these are all a package of things that we've applied to achieve a kind of an independence from the typical work system. Yeah.
Do you have children?
Yes, I do. I've got 2 children, 2 daughters, ages 1.5 and 9. And yeah, I mean, I think, for example, raising them in Bolivia versus New York City is, for me, far better, because you're in a culture that is more ecocentric, more indigenous. They're very nature-based. And quite frankly, we're not tied to work, so we're with our kids all the time. It's like we're able to just be with them a lot more. And they're very in tune to our little creek and to the fruit trees. And they're growing up bilingual. There's lots of advantages. I'm not saying that everyone has to move to Bolivia, and you're probably not going to, but for us, that was one edge to push that I thought was really interesting.
I was actually going to ask you what led you to that town in Bolivia, and were there other places you would consider?
Well, Samaipata, which is a Quechua word for resting in the highlands, just happened to just really attract both of us, and I think that everyone would have their own place in the world that they feel best. But for us, I had a writing fellowship there once. That they have this artist house there that I went and wow, just low cost of living, relatively speaking, which is true anywhere in the developing world, and just beautiful national park and Inca ruins and just this gorgeous kind of a place to live, good climate year-round, but also just the fact that you can kind of, we call it decolonizing, sorry, that's a very academic term, but decolonizing some of our ingrained habits of overconsumption and competitiveness that we found. We're both from Ivy League colleges and all this stuff, and from a certain background, but we're kind of decolonizing a little bit of that ethos. And we thought that Samaipata would be a good place to do it, and it is. It really is.
Are there other people sharing your passion?
Absolutely. There are. Yeah, there are. In fact, like I said, there are people from 30 countries that have come there. It's still only 5% of the village is foreigners. It's mostly Bolivian, which is nice balance. But yeah, there's definitely a community of our friends are ecological architects, the one who designed our house. Everyone lives in the town, and 80% of what we consume is produced there, in the town. So it's very local and organic and everything else. There are hardships. Of course, it's not easy. It's not like here. I come back to the States, and you pop up, on the T in Kendall Square, and there's all this beautiful buildings and stuff like that. I mean, it's harder. It's on the land. There's a dirt road going to our house, even though we live right by the village. You're working more, but like I said, humans are a tough species. We can adapt to these things, and actually harder is better. I can do hard. I like that. I like having to struggle a little bit more and not having it be too easy. That's my perspective. Yeah.
So, especially with multiple jobs, and you say you work harder, I'm having a difficult time balancing that with your statement of working 3 days, not 4. What does working mean, and what are you doing those other 4? Are they really not?
So, did everyone hear that question about sort of what am I doing the other 4 days? Oh, you didn't hear. Okay, so he's just saying how is it possible? I'm mentioning all these different things that I'm doing. How is it possible that there's actually the free time, right?
Well, what are you defining the free time as?
That's a great question. But I definitely, when I was doing the 2-day work week, which went to a 4-day work week in New York, halfway through the book, kind of had to change, but still 3-day weekends. I clocked in every 5-minute interval, whenever I was on the laptop at all, or doing anything related to an income stream, that was work. And it counted towards my 2 or 3 or 4-day work week, okay? Now, because we take these big creativity sabbaticals, where we're not doing anything, and we disconnect from devices and take these internet sabbaticals and so on, and vacation auto response, and we just like sort of tune out. Like a lot of times we're just like concentrated on like growing food, hiking, going back to beautiful places, hiking. We love to be outside, being with family in a non-connected way through work. Because the problem is the work constantly comes through the phone.
So you call growing food part of the non-work?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, so food production is not part of your income stream?
Well,
I mean,
it is in the sense that it is self-provisioning, but it just doesn't feel like work at the level we're doing it. It's not like we have this huge farm. We're producing it just intensively around the house and for tree production and so on, like maybe like 10 hours a week or less that we're actually putting into it. We're not turning it into this big thing. Because I guess what I didn't say is like a lot of really what this comes down to, and I don't know if this appeals to you or not, but for me and for my wife and our kids, what appeals to us is doing nothing too. I mean, oh God, it sounds so radical, but like taking 4 or 5 hours a day and just doing nothing. Like just walking behind our house, or just meditation, or literally, and this sounds crazy, like walking to your neighbors and just hanging out with them. Like people do that in this village. Like you just stop by and have tea with someone. Or you just sit in your hammock for a couple hours. Like all of these things. It's like the way we used to live when I was a kid, like in the 70s or something like that. Before we got into this culture of like a lot of speed. It's that more relaxed summer vacation type of feel that we bring to our whole lives. Does that make sense? So it's like, so we consciously integrate all of that into our lives, that free time and that nothing time. You know, it comes actually out of Africa. So I lived in Africa for a couple of years, and like, what I realized was that people had to spend 4 or 5 hours a day doing nothing, playing soccer, sitting in their hammocks, or they weren't happy. Like they have this leisure ethic instead of a work ethic. And that's kind of what taught me about this idea of not always being, yeah.
Why no wood stove in the cabin?
Why no wood stove in the 12 by 12? There is a space for a wood stove, and the physician that lives there to this day could have put one in, but she did not. She decided that she was just perfectly happy being cold when it got cold, and putting on extra layers, and making more tea.
Cold when it's 10 below outside?
Well, I mean, it is North Carolina, so it's not Boston. So it gets down to 20 sometimes at the coldest, but it's usually like 30s or 40s at the very coldest, you know, so.
is there a washroom?
In the 12 by 12? Okay, 12 by 12 has 2 porches, in the front and the back, and the back porch has a composting toilet. There's this, have you heard of it? You probably haven't, but it's called the Humanure Handbook. It's a contraction of human manure, Humanure Handbook. Teaches you all the different types of composting toilets you can make. That was right there on the shelf when I arrived. And I had to figure out how to use this thing. But basically, you go on the back porch, and it's like a 5-gallon bucket, hidden, and then there's a toilet seat, and there's cedar chips beside it. And when it fills up, you just dump it in a compost pile, and it becomes compost. That's it. It's very simple. It doesn't smell at all. And then the water for washing was a solar shower that I put out in the morning. The sun would heat it up, you hang it from a tree and you shower. And then the water for washing up dishes and stuff was also on the back porch, and that's just from the rainwater catchment from the house. So she's got this whole system that like she applies and lives off of, and it liberates her time. She donates her time as a doctor now. She doesn't even have to really work for money. Yeah.
Well, if this is a legitimate question, help me form it into a question. How much land does one have to live? How much land do you need of agriculture for a person to live on?
That's a great question. Jonathan, is it possible to pass me that? I guess I could just grab it, but if you just pass me that bottle of water. 4.5 acres is what, okay, the question is how much land do you need to live off of, right? So, thanks a lot. So, agronomists have said that with 4.5 acres, which is a little bit, we have 5.5. Every person on the planet, even all 7 billion people organized in families, could have 4.5 acres each and live very sustainably off of that. And there would be lots of wild forests and lots of conservation. It doesn't sound realistic, but it is. There's a lot of acreage we're using just in ridiculously ineffective ways.
So 4.5 per person, per family?
Per family, yeah. We could easily live off of our land. I mean, the soil is so productive.
Not living in Somerville.
Not living in Somerville, yeah, I'm just saying, but you could. But think about it, anyone in this room, right, either this year or within 5 years easily, could do what we did if you wanted to. You could liquidate what you have here and get something just so beautiful somewhere else where the cost of living is lower, and you could do it. I'm not saying you're gonna, but you have that power and the resources. Yeah.
You mentioned you are on sabbatical. Is that the case?
I mean, I still am on the adjunct faculty at NYU, and I bring students to Bolivia, and I teach the Sustainable Development Global Field Intensive, where we look at models of how to develop sustainably, like with these graduate students. So I'm not on a sabbatical. I mean, when I said sabbatical, I meant like I'm on a creativity sabbatical. That means these are, like, we come up with our own lexicon. Like, I don't know if you ever read Mountains Beyond Mountains, Paul Farmer, the physician at Harvard. They created the whole lexicon around poverty reduction and so on. And like, we have a whole lexicon around all this stuff. Like, so creativity sabbaticals just means I'm not going to work for like 2 months, and we're going to just develop new ideas. Whatever we want, like, in other words, we're not tied to anyone else. So we're going to come up with new, like, that's what it is. So writing a new book, whatever creative project, starting some kind of cottage industry, whatever it is, that's our creativity sabbatical.
I was asking because do you have an end date to live your life over there and come back?
Do I have an end date to live my life over there and come back? No. Not really. I mean, we do have our place in New York, which is rented out, another income stream. But
I was asking because your approach to your life could have been different if you have a time limit. It's like, okay, I will live there like 2 years, and then I will go back to my other life.
this, right? Yeah. I mean, this is, as far as we're concerned. I mean, I've never been happier than I am now in this town, living at this small, this beautiful scale, with community. Everyone knows me. We have beautiful nature. I mean, it's just like, what more could we want? In terms of having the absolute best schools and so on, I mean, again, that's another idea in our heads that you have to have the perfect everything for your kids. So I'm notching that down. I'm realizing that Amaya and Clea may not have the absolute best of everything. We're going to give them a wonderful life and education and basis, and they can go from there. But maybe it won't be even the level my wife and I had. You know? But it's like, I do think that this kind of disease, you might even call it a disease, around kind of over-educating our kids or overstimulating them, like this sort of helicopter parenting and over-scheduling kids, is not going in the right direction, in my opinion. So, yeah, did you?
What are some of the most surprising things you've learned about yourself in this transition slowly?
What are the most surprising things I learned about myself in this transition to living more slowly? That you can find a lot more happiness and joy in unexpected ways. That when you tie your self-esteem and everything to your position in life and your amount of income and your status, you're bound to always be unhappy because there's always someone higher. As soon as you get rid of that idea and you step out of this culture and into a culture like Bolivia where nobody has those ideas, where it's a very low idea. Much higher is how interconnected are you with others. Okay, it's like people are people through other people, right? It surprised me that, oh, I get self-esteem from just being helpful to people and being part of this group. So that's one of the things, yeah.
Just one thought, a couple family
friends who sort of downsized. One challenge, especially in the U.S., is sort of medical expenses. So say you reduce your income and you live a life, you know, a friend who's captain on a boat, lives on a boat, very low income, another one eventually touring band, and another one in a small cabin. You know, and it's great, but the U.S. is particularly challenged because you have some, you know, medical system we have.
Right.
Have you seen anything in different cultures that, or economists thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed at how a country like Bolivia, which is the second poorest economically in Latin America, has almost like a better medical system than we do. I mean, like for our baby daughter, like they would come around, a doctor would come like every 2 months to our house and check up on her, and they'd give her the shots there with the nurse. This whole team would come. They'd go around to everyone's house and do it. How are they able to do that? My mom was down visiting. She had an accident. We went to the hospital in Samipata there. They treated her right away, and it was 30 Bolivianos was the bill, $4. I don't understand. Like, so in other words, they have it's a socialist government. The government is socialist, and they have these policies they're redistributing. They tax the companies at high levels. like the oil and gas companies, the mining companies, and they just redistribute it to health and education. So that's part of it. And so it's universal, basically. The care obviously is not, the Harvard Medical School facility, obviously. So again, we've seen it as accepting a slightly lower level of care. We can go to Santa Cruz 2 hours away if we really needed something that was, US level or close to it. But on a daily basis, we're not tied into like super high-powered medical. So we do have insurance. You can, like in other words, someone like us living, you can have an evacuation plan, very cheap, and you can have catastrophic, like where you pay a deductible, and then for a couple $100s a month or something, you're covered for your family. So it's totally doable.
How much of this is made possible by the fact that, on a global scale, you're wealthy, you were born in the U.S., so therefore, on a global scale, you have resources that a lot of people don't have. How much of this would be possible for everyone in the world?
Yeah, I don't see this as like, okay, this is not a transferable model to anyone in the world. It's a transferable model to anyone in this room. And I'm talking to you about it in this way, but there's a whole other conversation that we could be having, which is the fact that people in Bolivia, like in this town of 4,000 people, for example, the well-being levels, the happiness levels, which we looked at, are very high. It's like 90%, okay? And people are living at very low levels of consumption without having to decolonize their thoughts or simplify or anything. They're already there. So it's this myth we have of like, we equate subsistence living sustainably and simply, with poverty. It was one of the greatest injustices of defining underdevelopment in that way, and that we have to bring this gift of development to the third world and so on. No. So part of this is like a south-north education of looking at like the gifts and the ways of life people have in countries that are indigenous and what we can learn from it and take from it. So it's a different type of a way of thinking about it that's hard to explain in a short lecture, but there's all kinds of books about this too, and films and stuff.
Do they think do they want to come to America?
It's a combination. I mean, as you know, everything's complex, but in Santa Cruz, in the city, the capital where the mall is and everything like that, obviously people look towards Miami and towards the US, and then there's another group of lots of people who are quite content and happy and not looking that way. So it's hybrid.
Thanks.
Sure. Any other questions maybe from somebody who hasn't had one yet? What do you all think over there? Any thoughts, ideas? Yeah.
That graph you showed earlier that showed the amount of money people earned over the last 50 or 60 years in the U.S., take it into account inflation?
Yes, it was adjusted for inflation. Right, so it's just, these are, okay, so the happiness studies or the well-being studies that are done through various universities are like, how happy do you feel, how satisfied do you feel with your life? So it's like, and people say how satisfied they are, and you just do it each year, and then you look at the trend. And it's just showing that it does, when you look at wealth increase, it's not making you happier after a certain point. Yeah?
I have a question. You're talking about writing a new book. What technology are you using to write it?
I'm sorry?
What technology are you using to write it?
Oh, okay. What technology am I using to write it? Yeah. I mean, this is my laptop right here. I use just a regular PC laptop. I often will dictate things onto a digital voice recorder, and then my intern will transcribe it, or usually my intern will do it. But, and then I use like right-brained activities. Like there's this book, Writing on the Right Side of the Brain, which I got many years ago. And it's like you do clustering, mind mapping. I guess you guys use tools for that, like on the internet. But I just use it in a notebook. You have different colored pens and stuff. And you write the concepts, and you branch out into new ideas. Yeah, you guys do this, right? Like on whiteboards and stuff. So then you hit an idea that's a purple patch, or like an energized stream of ideas, and then that's your idea that you're going to write about, and you branch out from there. So it's a right-brained way of generating ideas and material.
More general, what's the level of technology penetration?
Oh, my village. Okay, so Low, I would say, but growing. You know, I mean, it's a mix. I don't use a smartphone in Bolivia. Just a line that I've drawn. I don't want to model too much connectedness. I have one here, but my wife and I don't use that. There is Wi-Fi in our village, so like we're able to do, like there's Wi-Fi everywhere, so we're able to work and stream Skype and so on from the village. But I would say 95% of people don't have computers in their homes. Only 10% of people, no less, have cars. 5% of people have cars in our village. We don't have a car. Another wonderful thing about like this small living and dense living like that is you don't need cars, lots of public transportation. So yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it's like one of those questions like almost for you all. What do you think about the way that like technology is starting to penetrate a village like Samaypata? It's bringing video games in, very violent video games, into the internet cafes in the center. There's a lot of commercial content, lots of it coming through. Like that De Vargas Mall I showed you, they are advertising like crazy over the web too, with Facebook ads and everything else. So I mean, you know, there's that question, that double-edged sword, where it can be very liberating for people, of course, to have these tools. But on the other hand, it's definitely like changing their whole way of life and their ethos. So I'm not sure if you guys ever have that discussion about like sort of the ethics of creating certain technologies and exporting them to places. Yeah, okay.
So you mentioned Carlos Slim talking about 3 day or 4 day?
He talks. Yeah, he's advocating for a 3-day work week. Yeah.
And so that's very interesting to hear. Was there like a point, like what led into that declaration?
Well, I mean, like, how many people have heard of this? Did you read about this? This was on CNN and everything. Did anyone hear about the 3-day work? Okay, you did. All right.
I mean, I've heard,
Yeah.
I've actually proposed it to people I work with.
Oh, you have? Really? And what's been the feedback?
And it's like crazy.
We'll just say the world's richest man.
Say, now there's if you're Carlos Slim, you can propose just about anything, right?
He's an older man.
But what is it that he's like, advocating that for like everyone and?
Yeah, he's universal policy. He wants a 3-day work week.
I was wondering.
Yeah, I mean, he's Mexican, all right? So first of all, so right, he's Mexican, isn't that right? He's Mexican, so like, Latin America, by the way, the happiness indicators are much higher than other areas of the world. Like, I think he just realizes that like life is about extended family, about time, and other things besides just making money. He's like, oh crap, I'm like, whatever, 70 years old, and now I'm realizing, and he wants to give that gift to people of like free time. And I think he also sees it as more efficient. Like you get your work done, and then you're done, you refresh, and you come back.
My cynical reaction was, oh, 3-day work weeks, but you have 2 shifts, and so you're getting 6-day work weeks.
But like,
But again, I'm not trying to be cynical.
but isn't it great to batch your work? Like I love batching stuff. Like I love to work in intensive like periods, and then you're done for a while. I think that's part of the idea.
The appeal of mine was we could work 5 days and be off for 2, or we could do like 50-50. Like 3 days. That seems very like as a better balance.
Okay.
Like I don't even know what led to the 5-day work week, right? I know that legislation led to like 40-hour weeks, very long child labor laws in the U.S., but now it just seems like something that businesses get to decide.
Exactly, and you know, labor movements pushed very hard. Like, did you know that the big slogan in the American labor movement, when there actually were unions, like 100 years ago, was "bread and roses"? That was on the banners. And do you know what that meant? Like, give us bread, yes, give us like higher pay, but also time to smell the roses. Like that's really what they were advocating for. And unfortunately, like we lost the roses. As I showed you, the working hours have gone up considerably, and all of that benefit of free time. I mean, unions are only what, 9% right now of the country or less. They've lost that. And I know that there's some battles about vacation time going on now. Like I just saw how the Tribune, which owns the LA Times, stuff, there was a revolt in the whole workforce because they tried to push through like this other vacation, like taking away the discretionary days, sick days, and vacation days, and just have it all packaged into one. But it was a subtle way of like taking away their vacation time. Like anyway, this erosion of what is the idea of time off. So.
I very clearly remember the day I met someone who was from Europe working at my business at the time, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we get like by default 6 weeks of vacation," and I'm like, my head spun around.
Yeah.
Because I was very young in my tech career, and it was like 2 weeks chart about the number of days that people are taking off is very interesting.
Uh-huh. I mean, how many weeks off do you all get?
A lot. It's like, I'm in 6 weeks now. But
6 weeks, oh.
10 years.
Wow, that's great. 3? 3 is the entry? Okay. Huh. But still, 3 weeks is a very small amount. And I mean, do people actually take even all of their vacation days here? Because 40% of Americans don't even take their full 2.5 weeks of vacation. They lose those days. 41%. It's amazing. But people here, you actually take your 6 weeks. Okay. Yeah, try to. Okay, so at least you're honest. So. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I just wanted to say, just in conclusion, that I'm just very happy to have been here with you today, and I just think this is some of the most intelligent questions I've had in a while, which I think is really great. And I can tell you all are thinking a lot about this, even the fact that you came here today on a Monday morning to talk about these ideas of slow and finding more happiness and work-life balance and thinking about your role in the environmental crisis and everything else. Like, that's just phenomenal and shows that you guys are leaders here at Google. And I appreciate it very much, the opportunity to be here with you. So thank you for inviting me. And I hope that you enjoy the book. Also, oh, you do have some books here. Oh, wow, they just came just now. Okay, so yeah, and sometimes when you get something for free, maybe you don't appreciate it as much, but hopefully you'll actually read it and then pass it on to somebody else to read. Yeah, so thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you.